Hello everyone. I know it's super hot. I know you all want to drink, so please have one. Then take a seat and join us. I've got a revelation. I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of product in those slides, so hopefully you'll still enjoy it. What am I going to talk about tonight? Basically, I'm going to talk about an experiment that we started 18 months ago. So at the beginning of 2018. And at that time we were like a very classic engineering team. Basically, teams were static, not changing that much. And we decided to change a bit how we were doing things to be kind of more adaptable to the business need. So this is what I'm going to talk about tonight. I did this talk a few times already. This is probably the last time I will ever do it, and you'll know why. There will be a twist. So this is a slightly different version, and there is a good news, which is you can have an exclusive version. There is a bad news, which is I'm going to rush through all the beginning to basically have time to talk about other things at the end. Right, so who am I? I'm Julien. I'm an engineering manager. I work in a company called G Research. We're basically building trading system for the markets. And especially my team is in the data engineering space. But that's not the most important part. So the agenda for this talk is the following. I'll give you a bit of context as to where we're coming from and why we are where we are today. I'll explain a bit what I'm calling continuous routing. I'll talk about how we are tracking progress in this kind of new way of working, because that's a bit different from probably what you're used to. And I'll have some parting words, which is mostly the part that differs from all the previous talks. So that's the part where I rush, basically. So we started at the beginning of 2015, where basically we were in a situation where there was more or less one person doing on one task. And that was creating a lot of bottleneck, because there is always a dependency between those persons. Some person have expertise in UI, some person in backend. And whenever you do a project, well, you probably need quite a few of those people. So there was basically a very high buzz factor, a lot of work in progress, which means actually not that many things were done quickly, and very, very long lead time because a lot of queuing. So after that, we changed to product team, which made a lot more sense. So product team, very easy. You give a product to a set of people, and those people just get the job done. They may have specialty, but it's not really your problem. You just get them, hey, do that feature, and they kind of self-organize and use whatever skill they have to do that. That's great, but that's not super flexible. And the reason why is because if priorities change, if finally if you realize that one product needs a lot more investment right now than another, generally you tend to not reorg your team along those lines. That's actually quite rare. And that can be quite extreme, because you can end up with basically a product where you don't want to do any investment for the next 6 months or 9 months or whatever. What do you do with all those people? What do you do with the engineering manager, tech lead? Generally speaking, you will have a bit of a trouble to explain to that person, hey, you were a tech lead, you're not anymore, because your team doesn't exist and now we need you to go to another team. So that generates quite a bit of anxiety. And fundamentally, the problem there is most of the time you don't have very good adaptability to changing demand and very unequal work distribution. You create the team with some kind of workload in mind, then business changes priorities, and then most often it takes you quite a lot of time to readapt to that. So we ended up doing something a bit different, which is more like project teams. Basically, we kind of embraced the idea that everything was going to change every time. Instead of having those teams that were very fixed, I was basically changing team telling to my people to change team every now and then, depending on the new priorities. So that gave us a lot of flexibility, which is good. However, there's also quite a lot of downside to that approach, which is it's super hard to compose teams, because now as the person kind of doing the organization and choosing who works where, you have to take into account people's skills, people's desires. It's also extremely hard to stop and transition project, because people never want to stop the project, even if it's good enough. This is never good enough. They always want to do the extra refactoring, add a new feature, something. So they're like, hey, I would really need to stay 3 more weeks on my project. And most importantly for me as an engineering manager, it was like a massive overhead because basically I have the one that has to optimize a very complex problem of, on one side there is some supply with some desires, with some skill. On the other side, there is some demand that also needs some skills. And basically, how do you reconcile the two? So that's quite a lot of work. So that leads us to early 2018 when we decided to change things. So at that time, my team was 15 engineers growing. We reached almost 20 during the year. A lot of stakeholders, 10 different stakeholders, which means that a lot of people want us to do very, very different things. And that's especially true because we're a data team and you're in business when you're building a quantitative trading system, data is everywhere. So if you know all the teams that are building a model for trading the markets, etc., they all want data, all want different things. And it's extremely hard to reconcile all of that. So there was like a massive project backlog, more than 30 man-years of work at the time. And you know, obviously we generate more work that we can actually you know, get it done. So it's always kind of almost increasing. And me as an engineering manager, I was a bit sad for a couple of reasons. Because I thought people were not taking ownership. But on the other side, you know, if you think about it, if I'm constantly moving people from, you know, product A within the team to product B, how could they? It's a bit difficult for them, you know, to feel that, you know, they're going to be invested for the long term on that product and really take ownership. And the second question was, you know, how do we scale the team? Because there is one me doing the assignation that doesn't work really well. So how do I get, you know, new leaders that kind of, you know, emerge and help me doing all that stuff? So at that point, it was really time to think a bit about really what we were trying to optimize for. And those are the things that I thought were really important. The first one is deliver business impact. Sure, I'm leading teams of, you know, software engineers, but our goal is not actually to write software. And one of the things I say to my guys very regularly is I don't really care if your piece of software is in production, if no one is using it, or if it doesn't have any impact, positive impact to anyone. So that was really kind of the most important, you know, how do we maximize the business impact we can have for the business? The second one was adaptability to demand. Since we have all those stakeholders, we can't work for all of them at the same time. So the business is going to ask us sometime to invest massively on one part and then at another point in time on another part of the system. So we need to be able to shift rapidly our priorities and also shift rapidly the people that work on the left to the right. The third one was, hey, how do you grow team members? And different people have different wishes. So how do you help them acquiring the skills they would like, whether it's our technical skills or a bit more organizational skills? Then share learnings when your team is getting bigger. You know, you want to find a way to get what works great, reapply another part of your team or organization. And then the last two are really kind of more specific to me. I'm a believer in self-organization. I think that's a better way to work. And mostly because I can remove myself from the equation. So I can do other things for the business, or I can go and talk to conferences. You know, I basically want to make myself redundant. The other thing that I wanted to optimize for, it's a bit different. It's coming from a book called Drive. And basically, Dan Pink, the author of that book, has an hypothesis, which is the things that motivate people are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, I work, you know, without depending on the whole world to do whatever I want. Mastery, I can develop my skills. And purpose, you know, what I work on has some meaning to me. I do care. So I really recommend that book. That's a really good book and have a read. So that's also, you know, another thing that I wanted to, you know, take into input as to, you know, build a new system of work. So I had a lot of inspiration, and I won't talk too much about that today because we're short of time. Work with Dan North that the London community knows here, and I know he's been kind of, you know, pushing some similar ideas in plenty of companies around there. And that leads us to continuous reteaming. And kind of, you know, disclaimer, two things. Well, first, there's quite a few companies doing similar things with different name. I don't think we've standardized on the name. So if you hear that by another name, that's fine. Don't throw tomatoes at me. Secondly, do we have engineering managers in the room or people that, you know, lead others? A few. So you guys, That's the leap of faith part. That's the part that you're not going to like, because that's the part where you think you're going to lose a lot of control. So don't worry, bear with me, and hopefully you'll get a few ideas that you want to try at the very end. Right, so this is all great. You've got this idea that teams are going to self-organize and you want like massive adaptability. How do you do that in practice? How do you get people to choose what they work on? Because this is really what this is about. We push the self-organization to the level where actually people can decide what project they work on. So it all starts with a planning day. And the theory is really, really simple. We take the demand side, we take the supply side, we put all of those people in the same room, we shake, and at the end of the day, we've got a new plan. It's wonderful. The manager does nothing. It's just watch and facilitate. That's all good, but what does it look like in practice? How do you make that happen? Right, so the way we do that is basically the following. We started with breakfast because let's not be too hard on ourselves. But most importantly, building software is actually all about relationship and talking to people. And there was some reference communication. I totally stand by that. So have breakfast, have some fun, just enjoy talking to your colleague, finding out what you're doing. Then let's find out what people have been doing for the last quarter, because that's quite useful. And you want to really energize people and say, hey, we probably achieved quite a lot. What is that lot? Let's share that. Let's celebrate all together. Then you want to know what are your priorities for the next quarter. So you're going to want to have the demand side pitching for their ideas and giving you a bit of context about what are the outcome they're targeting. And that's going to be great because it's going to be providing visibility to all the people. And we've been doing that with up to 50. But I know some companies that did it with 200. And that's going to build alignment across the organization. Now everybody is aware. It's not like some part of the organization do something totally secret, nobody else knows, and then the right-hand side of the organization happen to do exactly the same thing just because people did not talk to each other. We're going to have lunch and again, let's have a chat because it was already quite intense, believe me. And then we're going to start talking about how to organize the work for the next quarter and how to create those teams. And to do that, we need some constraint because it's not a free-for-all. And I will give you some context about what those constraints are. Then that's really the workshop part where people are going to iterate, form teams, engage with all the relevant parties, and end up with a new project plan for the quarter. Again, the manager will do nothing. He will just watch. This is a bit uncomfortable at the beginning, I can tell you. And finally, at the end of the day, we're going to present what is the resulting plan and make sure it does pass our constraint and that there is not like someone deeply unhappy somewhere in the room. Hopefully you finish with drinks because believe me, that's really, really, really intense. So, same thing, time to celebrate. You manage to build a plan in one day where generally you're used to taking 3 months to build a plan for the next 3 months. So that's good. So let's dig a bit into what are the requirements before going into the details on some of those kind of activities of the day. What do you need to make that happen? Well, the very, very first thing is that you need to know what are your priorities. Otherwise, that's going to be a bit difficult to come up and present them. So you probably have different stakeholders. They want different things. Hopefully, they've got some kind of portfolio, backlog, whatever you want to call it. The hard part is coming with the merge portfolio where people in the organization actually agree on what are the most important thing that you should be doing. And I won't talk about that. There's plenty of talks about how to achieve that. So that's not the goal of today. You need people, so you need to warn them that they're going to book a day in their calendar. You need obviously people on the demand side, people that do want work. If they're not there, that's going to be a bit difficult to get details on what exactly they want to target. And you want the supply side, people that are going to actually do the work. So there's going to be a software engineer, system engineer, ops people, or whatever other kind of people that are helping building this piece of software and delivering value to the business. You need a big room. I won't go into the details. Lots of space to put lots of post-its. Because that's what we do with Agile, post-its. And that's possibly one of the most important things. You need some constraints. So how do you get 50 people in a room and make sure that at the end of the day, you don't have something that you think is entirely crazy as a manager? Well, you do that by having some constraints that are going to make sure people are optimizing for the right thing. And I'll give you some examples of the one that we choose. The The most important one for us is all works need to be picked or deprioritized, because it's not because engineers don't want to do a piece of work that it doesn't have value for the business. So you don't want to have a big part just left aside. So everything gets picked. If we find out that we can't do it, or really like no one wants to do it, etc., it's up to the stakeholders to decide if they want to drop that thing during the day. The other things that we do is we want teams of a certain size, between 3 and 6 people. Less than 3, I think this is not a team, because people will be on a holiday, whatever, blah. If you want someone to do your code review, that's going to be harder. More than 6, mostly because we want to optimize and reduce the numbers of communication paths in the team. But pick whatever number is right for you. And we actually had a team of 7. We decided, okay, that's okay for this quarter. So those constraints are not like set in stones. Be smart about those. Also, we've got another constraint that is interesting and quite special, which is sometimes you can have project or new business outcomes that are like a direct continuation on a previous work that's been done by a team last quarter. So basically, you're saying that there's going to be some kind of continuation of a team. And what we decided, mostly for a cross-pollination purpose, and it was about sharing learnings in terms of some of the things I want to optimize for, is that in that case, we want at least one person that leave the teams and one person that join. So if there are some great ideas in one team, they will start spreading out just like that, and people won't stay forever in the same team for being comfortable. The other thing that leads to is that it creates opportunity for different people that want to develop different skills to join those teams where they could actually use those skills. Otherwise, that may not happen. And you can have as many constraints as you want, but I would certainly recommend having less than more. Another one you could have, for example, is saying, hey, 20% of our time should be spent on doing Kaizen improvement work and making sure the system is better. So let's go through some of the activities of the day and how that works more in practice. So as I said, we want to have some presentation of last quarter achievements. We spend 5 minutes per team. Really what is important, I can't insist enough on that, is you want to focus on the impact. As I said, I don't care if your piece of software is in staging environment or in production. How did you move the needle? And one of the things that quarterly planning forces you to do is that since you don't have any guarantee that there will be a team next quarter, is actually act as some kind of very strong focus point where hey, if we don't deliver something by the end of those 3 months, actually there may not be a team anymore. So it's super important that we have something to show and that we can deliver this business impact and not rely on the fact that the team will exist forever. And you also talk about any significant work that may be in progress. The most important thing is really to get this first part of the day as fun as you can. Those are real slides that we've used. It's really about energizing people and recognizing all the good work that was done. And we don't do that enough, I think, at least certainly not in my company. The demand side pitch. So this is where the stakeholders come in on stage and they're going to present their vision for the next quarter. And as much as possible, you want them to share, what is the context, why does this project matter, why are we doing it now, and why we didn't do it like 6 months ago, or why not wait. Again, focus on the business impact. Whenever I talk to stakeholders to get them to present, at the very beginning, they always start with a list of tasks. I want a blue button on my grid. Please don't do that. Why do you want a blue button on your grid? Try to go back to really what matters to them. And a very important question, to kind of prime the quarter is, what does a great quarter look like? And the reason why is that people will present your vision. Their vision is probably grandiose, like they want everything. This is going to be glorious and it's wonderful. But fundamentally, they recognize that it takes time to build those things. So by asking them, what would a great quarter look like, actually tend to have a slightly different response, even a very different response. So yeah, that's act as some kind of reference point that you can use. And then they're going to be answering question. What's amazing is that actually stakeholders tend to find out between themselves what are the projects, and therefore they ask questions to themselves because they didn't know that someone was going to work on something. The second part of the afternoon is the self-selection. So that's where the team basically cluster the work. They've written post-it in the morning. They put it all together. They decide how that together should look like. And then their expected outcome for the day is basically a big sheet of paper with what is the team name, the composition, what is the mission, who are my stakeholders, what is my capacity, and kind of very, very finger in the eight estimate for the quarter, any risk and dependencies, and OKRs. I won't talk about OKRs today because I don't have time. Read that book if you don't know what OKRs are. This is a great way to kind of get a team to organize their work and focus on the outcome and not just on a specification that's been given to them by someone. And we're going to iterate in the afternoon. One important trick is to try to install some sense of urgency where basically the first iteration is going to be 60 minutes. People are going to walk around, find out what the work is about, talk with plenty of people, and then they're going to drop their name on some next to some bunch of post-its. And then you're going to start asking questions at the end of the first iteration. And the question is basically, hey, have we met all the constraints? Yes, great. Is there too much work somewhere? No, let's move on. Is there any concerns by the stakeholders? Such as, for example, I'm working on the back end of my system, like on Spark, and then I only have like people with UI experience. Probably not a good thing. You should probably adapt. The very important things there is that, again, as an engineering manager, this is not your role to take someone and say, hey, you're a UI person, I really need a Spark person in here. You don't do that. You just highlight the problems. Believe me, people wake up in the morning, they want to do the right thing. So if you do highlight the problem, you will see some self-organization happening and someone will start to move. If some of the constraints are not met, start new iterations and just get faster and faster because that does create a sense of urgency. So there's a few things we've not achieved with that process. The first thing is that we do have to recognize that this is not a static plan. Things will happen in the business, so that doesn't mean you don't react for the next 3 months. There's no perfect way for that, and as the engineering manager, you may have to jump in the next 3 months and decide to do things differently for whatever reason. We'll need a delivery lead for the team, which is someone that is going to act almost as some kind of a product owner, or actually going to make sure the team works toward the North Star, towards the objective. And this is going to be the main contact I would have for all of the quarter for making sure that we are on track. And work on the OKRs. And again, I won't talk too much about that. I learned a lot of stuff, and again, not much time, but mostly the one important thing, and that was why I was saying this is the hard part for the engineering manager. As the engineering manager, you're used to have a lot of power. You decide a lot of things for your people, even if you believe you're not. And basically, what's very likely to happen is that you're going to, very, very strongly influence the teams before, and basically you're going to end up with preformed team. So be extremely careful about that, because basically, if the teams are already preformed, and we had that problem in some part of the organization, that doesn't work. People come and they're like, why on earth am I spending that day where I know exactly what I'm going to do with whom? And I'm also a very big believer that you tend to have like an optimization that is a lot worse that way than if you get 50 people to self-organize. I've discovered plenty of things by letting my guys doing that. So is it a success? Well, in my team, certainly was. I tend to ask a very simple question for a lot of activities that we do the first time or in the first few times, which is basically, do you want to keep doing it? And in that case, the answer was overwhelmingly yes, with just one person that was kind of neutral, because it doesn't really like the fact that it may have to change every quarter. But it doesn't have to, because remember, there are some continuations. So actually, we've got some teams that mostly, were stable plus 1 person or minus 1 person for 9 months. The big downside is you don't have like a very good long-term product ownership. That certainly doesn't solve that problem. I believe also that it only works with software that fits in your head, e.g. microservices. And it's a big leap of faith. Like, the first time you do that as an engineering manager, you are extremely comfortable. Since I didn't talk about OKR, I'm actually not going to talk too much about progress, but my talk is online, and it's actually a very interesting part. So if you're interested, please, just Google my name and find out. And I'm going to talk a bit more about slightly different things and kind of parting words. Most of the teams, most of the people I talk to, when they say we're agile, really what they mean is those people are agile. The team are actually, writing software. The whole organization is not agile. So, they may be doing Scrum, XP, etc. But the next layer is pretty much command and control. Do that. We were kind of, injecting some kind of constraint in you, such as, what are the people, what is the work you should work on. But yeah, those people tend to be really, really deciding a lot of things. And as I was saying kind of earlier, I do believe autonomy, mastery, and purpose are a very important thing if you want to motivate an engineering team. And I do believe that this very different way of working actually kind of works very, very well with that. Because self-organization means, more autonomy. Because when you do decide who is part of your team, actually you're very likely to have the right skill in the team because people don't want to have dependency on everybody else. Self-selection means, you can choose what skills you develop, but also it's very good for the purpose because you can choose the project that matters more to you. Business impact and OKRs actually, imply that there will be a purpose because, hopefully there is something you can measure and is meaningful for the business. It's not just a to-do list. But is your organization really ready for business agility? Because that's really what we're talking about, right? This is being extremely reactive to change in business and making sure that, your structure adapts very quickly. And turns out, not really in our case. So I don't know if you remember that slide, but getting the top-end project, for some reason in my company, is extremely difficult. Stakeholders don't agree, and we've not find like a good way to get anyone to decide. So basically getting the top-end project is kind of not really achievable in my context. So the ideal progress, as far as I see it, is kind of really limit the work in progress, have one project, deliver business impact, then move on, deliver business impact, move on, deliver business impact. And that slide is brand new from today. It's a bit horrible, so sorry. But one of the things that means is that I try to just plot the stakeholder happiness on that axis. And what you see is the first stakeholder is like super happy. Well, he's not very happy at the beginning because you're not doing work. Then you start doing work, so his happiness kind of increase. You deliver, he's super happy. Then a month after that, he totally forgets about you. He wants more work. And then you start another project. But that means that at any point in time on this axis you can have like two people that are very, very unhappy because you're not working with them. And I think it's not a problem because hey, that's a business priorities. But that is what actually my business prefers today. It's everything work in progress. Hopefully massive business impact at the end. In practice, I think it's going to be a bit harder than that because all those things are going to be imposed at some point or another because dependency, whatever, blah. So that's the ID line. And the reason why the business prefers that is every single stakeholders from the very beginning tends to have more happiness as time passes until all the project finishes. But that never finishes. There's always more project. So they all get some sense of progress. So they're super happy about that. Even though this is probably not the right outcome for them, but they don't really realize that. So basically, wrong hypothesis. Adaptability to demand, I was really, really keen about that. I think that's a good thing, but that's not what's being asked of us. Business impact, by extension, is also not as important because we'd rather please people that have very, very high business impact. So what does that mean for us? That means we actually stopped this experiment last quarter. My whole team is very, very, very sad about it. But the good news, as I said, is there's actually quite a few other companies doing that in London. So I'm hopeful that some others will continue those experiments and find better ways of working. So that was me. Thank you for your time, and yeah.